Hi, this is Bill Rodgers. I just want to tell you, I just spoke with Boston Chris, and he's got one of the best shows I've ever done in my life. And I've done a lot of interviews over the years, and he loves music, but running and music are close. They're like brother and sister or something. So tune in because you're going to be really fascinated by this guy and by all his interviews. I think he's great.
It's time to jive. It's time to mingle. It's time to see what everyone's drinking. It's time to jive. It's time to mingle. It's time to see what everyone's drinking. Until we all lose connection.
Hey guys, Boston Chris here with another fabulous episode of the Boston Chris podcast. You are tuned in to episode number 52. And today's episode is a little bit different than our normal thing. That's right, guys. Typically we have musicians, artists, bands, people that are, have some kind of connection to the music world. But today is different. Today we are talking to one of the most accomplished long distance runners in the history of United States track and field and cross country. That's right. We have Bill Rodgers on the show. Bill Rodgers is the only human being to ever win the Boston Marathon, the New York Marathon, and the Fukuoka Marathon in Tokyo to hold the championship for all three of those marathons at the same time. He is a 1999 National Track and Field Hall of Famer, inducted in 1999. This year is the 50th anniversary of the first time he won the Boston Marathon. The man has won 4 Boston Marathons, 4 New York City Marathons. In 1978, he entered 30 races and won 27 of them. Imagine! That's incredible, incredible stuff. And we get to chat with Bill for almost an hour today about his life, about his passion, growing up, all kinds of stuff. You don't want to miss this conversation. We're going to get into it right now. Y'all don't go anywhere. Here is Bill Rodgers.
Hey, y'all, this is Scott Sean White, and thank you for tuning in to the Boston Chris Show.
Guys, it's the Boston Chris podcast. We're up to episode 52. We have something a little bit different than what we normally do. We're typically, we talk to songwriters and musicians and bands and stuff like that, but we are not restricted to just music. I would love to talk to more outside of music, and we have perhaps one of the greatest runners in the history of cross country and track and field on the show today. I can't believe I have Bill Rodgers on the show today. Bill, how you doing?
I'm good, Chris, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so this all happened from a mutual friend who emailed me, and I think he saw one of my live shows, and he was just like, I know Bill Rodgers just in passing, and I was like, what? No way! So through him, we were able to make this happen, and so I'm excited to pick your brain and tell your story a little bit today. I understand you grew up in Connecticut. Is that right?
Yes, I was born in Hartford, but first 7 years of my life, then my older brother Charlie, and 2 sisters, Martha and Linda, we moved to Newington, about 10 miles out of Hartford, and that's where I became a runner. My sophomore year in high school, they were starting cross country running.
Yeah, which I think is amazing how our lives can be shaped by something so random, right? Like, so you're playing hockey and baseball prior to that, and then all of a sudden your high school happens to pick up a cross country program, and just that shaped your life probably more than anything else, right? Just them picking up a cross country program.
Yes, it was the first year they'd ever had cross country. It was only boys because in 1963 there wasn't a lot of girls or women's running except maybe in the 100 meters, 200 meters, the sprints, events like that. But I ran the gym class mile, and I was the fastest kid in the school in the mile. And I'm not sure if it was because, when the cops were occasionally chasing me, and I got in trouble.
Of course. That's great stuff. Yeah, yeah, you got to be faster than them. It's like the old zombie apocalypse stuff, right? You don't have to be faster than the zombies. You just have to be faster than the slowest person running from the zombies, right?
Absolutely. Name of the game.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great stuff. So yeah. Let me ask you this, because this is always a great question that I ask a lot of musicians. Growing up, what are some lessons that you learned from your family that you still kind of apply to your life today?
You know, really good question. Um, at first, my brother Charlie and I were just doing cross country, and I ran one road race my senior year in high school, but I wasn't a marathoner. I didn't become a marathoner till years later when I moved to Boston and saw the Boston Marathon. But my dad was a mechanical engineer. He was a scientist type, and my mom was a nurse's aide in Newington. And but I learned a lot from them. One thing, they were both kind of very hardworking and kind of persevering type people. And there were four of us, so they were working hard to take care of all four of us.
Hmm.
And so I think we all felt that and understood, that they were trying hard to help us out. And so for a marathoner, a distance runner, you really like that. It's a you know it's kind of almost an everyday thing. In fact, I trained twice a day for a lot of years, and because it's all cardio, you're building your heart,
Hmm.
and then it's also kind of mental. Running is a mental sport.
Yeah, so I was curious about that because I agree with you. It's very, very mental. I think it's more mental than physical because you kind of have to turn off the pain, so to speak, right, and bring yourself to a different place. So mentally speaking, what is the training like there that's a little bit different than training physically?
The training mentally and everything.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think, you know what I think, Chris, that it's really that you get used to it. You find, I ran 2 miles when I was running cross country, 2.5 miles. Then in college, it went up to 5 miles. And that was a pretty long haul to run
Yeah,
cross
yeah, yeah.
country.
That's
Or
double.
two, yes, or 2 miles on the track, and I was a little Division III school, but a great school. But I was very lucky. I always had good coaches. My high school coach, Coach Frank O'Rourke,
Hmm.
great coach. This is a key. Most people never had a coach, and most people never played a sport. I think because they weren't chosen in their high school days. Do you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah,
cross country, the door is open to everyone. No one gets benched. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah.
They do have scoring by five-person teams, both men and women. And cross country is a big sport now in the United States. About 500,000 young high school and college age runners run cross country, all three divisions. And there's also a world cross country championships, and I ran in those twice. But most people think I can't do this, and because they never had a chance at it. But really, it's very simple. It's just going out and getting your running shoes or your walking shoes. Actually, I believe walking is the best sport of all because you don't get injured much,
Right. Yep.
unless, unless you're walking on the icy roads of Boston now.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your high school coach, Frank O'Rourke. I wanted to talk a little bit about him as well because I know that the passion for something comes from within almost always, right? So if you have a passion for running or cross country, track and field, whatever it is, that comes from within. But if you don't have somebody to cultivate that and teach you and train you along the way, then that passion is only half the battle. So I'd love to hear you talk about the impact of Frank on your life and your career.
He was the first year coach, and but we knew that he had been a runner in college, so that gave us a lot of thought. Like, wow, he really knows what he's doing. He's good, and he was kind of this really mellow coach. He wasn't like some of the coaches that you hear of who drive their athletes into the ground.
The drill
Or
instructor coaches, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't mind. I want a knowledgeable coach. The knowledgeable coaches are the best coaches.
Hmm.
That's what I think. And no, I don't know about the other sports so much, but in running, it's definitely true. And because this is a highly competitive sport, it doesn't get much ink or sports coverage, but it's, you know, athletics, under
Mhm.
which marathoning is a part, is growing all over the US and all over the world. And more people are trying these kinds of sports because number one, it's about your health, your
Mhm.
life, and
Mhm.
what you want to do. And the door is open. It's not too expensive, compared to some other sports. You don't get really bad injuries like some sports. And you have fun and you meet great people. So it's really kind of a win-win sport. But Coach O'Rourke, one time I do remember swearing at him once though. I was running around the track and it was like a hot day and I could hear him on the other side of the track and he yelled something to me and I swore something. So now and then there's teenage angst, and
Mhm.
it is a hard sport
That
because
rebelliousness, right?
yeah, and you just kind of sometimes you don't want to keep going
Mhm.
and you quit. And I used to never really run in the summers, when I was in high school or college. But my college teammate, who actually won the Boston Marathon, Amby Burfoot from Groton, Connecticut,
Mhm.
he told me, Bill, when we go home for the summer, try running 5 miles every other day, something like that. But I didn't do it until my senior year. And then when I did that, my times really came down when I went back to school. So the training is key. You don't have to go crazy. You can get a lot in this sport by doing a little.
Yeah, I love that. So again, we mentioned, sophomore year is when they really brought cross country to your high school program. Prior to that, you're playing other sports. What was it at that time that really opened your eyes about cross country versus what you were doing prior to that? Like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great for me.
Well, you know what, Chris? In prior to that, we would go out, a group of us, and we baseball, and we play a pickup game sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, we, when I was even younger, they had our school, the Reynolds School, middle school. We had a summer phys ed program, and you could take part in different activities there. And we would run races around the school because
Hmm.
kids are always running. If you take a look at kids, they're always moving
Hmm.
and they have that energy. And I was someone who needed to put my energy to good use, and so I found that. But the good thing in particular was not only Coach O'Rourke at Newington High School, but my brother Charlie, who's a year older than me, and our best friend Jason Kehoe. He joined us, and we knew each other since childhood. So it was like you're already out there with your friends.
Hmm.
If you're out there with your friends, there's no pressure, and it should be that way, but the sports world does have pressure sooner or later.
So it's basically, a smaller group of people can kind of hang out and run. You don't have to worry about hitting a ball through somebody's window. You don't need equipment. You just go running, right?
Just go running. I have
Yeah.
no idea what shoes I was wearing then,
Hmm.
and but we would run around the school, and there was a dirt path, and sometimes we would do pickups on the path. And later he started to time us with a stopwatch, handheld stopwatch, like one held by Paavo Nurmi from 1910 or something. Excuse me. And but also our track was in a grass field, and it was 5 laps to the mile,
Okay.
and so it was very different from the modern era tracks today. Our sport keeps changing. The shoes have gotten better and better and better. The tracks are better and better. The knowledge of training is better and better. The coaches, there's more and more really knowledgeable coaches.
And
So our
that's all of that is true, which I find to be so makes you even more impressive to me because you still hold a bunch of American records.
I do hold some records, some on the track. The reason why, Chris? There's no money in them.
But again though, this doesn't stop. There's always going to be runners, right? And you just admitted that equipment is better, the tracks are better, the athletes are better, but yet you still hold these records. So, I mean, that's incredible stuff, man.
I set some American records for the 1 hour run at Boston University. The track has now been demolished.
Yeah.
The track's gone, but I still do own the 1 hour run, the 15K, the 20K, and on the 25K. And so I was into track too, to a degree.
Yeah.
I wasn't quick. I wasn't one of these fast young high school kids. And I found that out one day when I was on our relay team. And excuse me, our team had the lead, and I took the last baton, and this young freshman from the other team went by me like I was standing still. And I didn't understand why. I'm a pretty good 2 mile, but why did this kid running 200 yards leave me like I'm standing still? I didn't understand that we have two different muscle types, fast twitch and slow twitch. Fast twitch is football, basketball, baseball,
Yeah.
but marathon, slow twitch. But sometimes you can have a combo. Some top runners really have a
Yeah.
combo.
I was going to ask that because it would seem like I don't know much about what you're talking about, but it would seem like in a marathon type situation, you kind of have to kick it into a different gear at some point, right? Like if you're in a more competitive style race, like a Boston Marathon or something like that, and you're coming down to the last mile, if you're have another runner close to you, you have to kick it into fast twitch, don't you?
You do, and particularly in the marathon, it's a tricky thing. One year I had gotten into the lead in Boston in 1978, and I made my move coming down out of Wellesley down a big hill, and because I knew the course.
Yeah.
Once you know the course, you got an edge and confidence. And I had run Boston 3 or 4 times already, and I'm trying to break away. And then with about a mile to go, a motorcycle cop is pacing me in, and he says, "Bill, someone's moving up on you."
Wow, so you paid off the cops, Bill.
Yeah, I didn't pay him, but you know what I mean. He
We
just
found
gave
the
me,
truth today. We found the truth.
yeah, it is kind of a secret story, and because it was one of your fellow Texans, Chris, who was moving up on me, a fellow who was on the U.S. team in world cross country, and I had run with him, and he beat me in world cross country. His name was Jeff Wells, and he went to Rice University. Anyway, he was flying over the last mile, and I just edged him by 2 seconds at the end.
Wow.
Over the length of a marathon, that isn't much,
No, 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 I know. And so or when you're running these races, you know who's close and who isn't.
Yes, the thing is, Chris, back in '78, this is before the sport went really professional,
Right,
and where they had a sponsor who would come in and make sure that that the crowds were protected. Like if you ever watch the Tour de France, you see these cyclists going narrowly through these bands of people, and,
right.
and they're trying to find their way through. And at Boston, it was just like that. You'd be coming down out of Cleveland Circle, 22 miles. There'd be people on bikes whizzing by, and the cops were on horses. It was kind of a wild scene. It was like the Tour de France. But you just had to keep your focus. And the crowds at Boston, of course, are phenomenal because they
Right.
know this event. It's so old.
And
So,
so
so
do
that's
you
how
have
I,
spotters along the way that are telling you things like what's coming up ahead, what's going on behind you? Like do you have that information being fed to you?
no, but sometimes people would yell me something.
Okay.
They'd yell me something. People would get me water or something. My brother Charlie would come out with a glass of water. My coach Billy Squires would have a glass of water. Things like that. But basically, you're supposed to be on your own.
Right.
This is the marathon.
Yeah,
And
unless you pay off the cops, right, Bill?
unless you pay off the cops. That's right. That's right.
Reading about you in the mid '70s, there was nobody better than you. I mean, let's be honest. In the mid '70s, there was nobody better than you. For example, just to let my viewers know out there, 1978, Bill Rodgers entered 30 races and won 27 of them. That is ridiculous.
I think I was very lucky in that I had that run at a time. I had a great coach. We all did, Coach Billy Squires. Other runners came in and they passed me and beat me because this is just the nature of the game.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing. There's always new talent coming up. My young friend at the time, Alberto Salazar from Wayland, Massachusetts, he was 16 when he joined the Greater Boston Track Club. Well, some years later, he and I dueled at the New York City Marathon, and he beat me. But we were friends. At the end of this sport, it's like golf. You shake hands.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about education here, because you graduated from Wesleyan with a bachelor's in sociology. Then you went to Boston College and got your degree in special education. So I imagine you're not making a lot of money running. So what was your day job, so to speak, with all this incredible education you received?
Well, I did get a teaching job in Everett, Massachusetts. I taught special ed kids for 2 years, and then for a year, I also worked at a school for kids or young people who are really beat up, by disease or such. And so I learned a lot there. And when you work in a place like that, when you are in that situation, you think different. You
Mm-hmm.
think different for a while. And but finally, what happened to me, Chris, was one of my good buddies was a Boston bartender who became very well known. He was a former Marine and all, but very focused guy. Started the Falmouth Road Race on Cape Cod and the Holyoke Road Race and Holyoke, Mass. And he just loved running because of his days in the Marines and running in Boston. Well, he told me, Bill, why don't you open a running store? And so in 1977, I ended up doing that. I had family support, and later my brother Charlie came in as the manager, and Jason Kehoe came in as our assistant manager, our childhood friends.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
so it was just fun. We were having fun, Chris.
So
Really,
running was your career as well, wasn't it?
it became my career full time. Oh yes, definitely.
That's incredible stuff. So you talked about Billy Squires, your coach, and I find this to be interesting as well. In 1973, um, Billy Squires started the Greater Boston Track Club. This was something new, and
Yes.
I mean, this seems like right up your alley. Obviously, it just looking back at it, it's very serendipitous. But this is like joining the Red Sox or the Patriots, isn't it?
Well, it was in a way because we had, not only the marathoners contingent, but we also had sprinters like Don Ricciardo
Right.
and milers, and so they would run relay races at the Melrose Games in New York City, travel around the country for cross country meets, our national cross country champs. But Squires was a miler at Notre Dame. He was a high school talent, went to Notre Dame, very, very good, and was coaching at Boston State University, and 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 two guys at Boston College, Jack McDonald and Bob Seveny, who is actually from Bentley College. They wanted to keep going in this sport.
Right.
They didn't want it to end at age 20 or when you graduated college or high school or something. So that's what they did, and someone thought of Coach Squires. This you'd have to meet Billy Squires to really get it, but he had a tremendous amount of energy, personal energy, and love of the sport,
Mm-hmm.
passion for the sport.
Yeah, I love that because when you're in a popular sport like baseball, hockey, basketball, football, there are avenues beyond high school, right? You can go to college for those things. You can go to the pros and whatever, but like for the lesser known sports, cross country, amateur wrestling, things like that. Shoot, I
Hmm.
even like marching band is another good example. Like once school ends, that's it. Like there's no other avenues for you
Yeah,
as an athlete or a performer in those kind of those avenues. So, it takes somebody like Billy Squires to just come along and say, you know what, I'm going to make a path for this. You know?
it's absolutely true. He wasn't paid. We didn't have any money to pay him.
Right.
We were all kind of a little poor, you could
Yeah.
say, and this is just the way it was. But we all started to succeed working together under Squires. And Greg Meyer went on to win Boston. He got a shoe contract with Brooks Shoe. And all of us others went to New Balance Shoe Company, Bobby Hodge, Jack Foltz, um, Walter Murphy. And so everyone on our team started to succeed. Some made a living at it, and some, like Fred Doyle, he went on to work with Nike. Mark Duggan went on to work with Nike. They were kind of a new company 40 years ago. So they were getting in the early days of the running boom,
Yeah.
which really started, Chris, in 1972 when American Frank Shorter won the gold medal, the Olympic marathon.
Yeah.
Because most people thought, well, Americans are kind of soft.
Yeah.
They're not too tough. They don't do really, really well in the marathon, though some have in the past. But when Frank won in 72 and beat Mama Walde from Ethiopia and this runner and that from England and the Europeans who were supposed to be the best, everyone said, what the heck?
Yeah. I love hearing that because, like, just looking back at your career and trying to tell the story of it, there's so much fate involved in your path, right? Like I mentioned, the cross country being picked up by your school, ending up with Billy Squires at the Greater Boston Track Club. Like, it just seems like fate brought you to these places along your path, and it's just a cool way of looking at things. You talked about the Olympics, and I want to talk about that a little bit with you, too. I feel like you got unlucky in a little way, in kind of a way when it comes to the Olympics, because you, again, were the best in the world, in my opinion, just from researching you, from, say, 77 to 79. There wasn't too many people better than you. 1980, the Americans didn't go to the Olympics because we were boycotting the Olympics. Which is very unlucky for you because that's your prime. And in 76, you were injured, right? You entered the race, but somehow you got injured. Tell us about that.
Yeah, what happened was in 76, I made the team. I was 7 seconds behind Frank in our Olympic trials marathon, Eugene, Oregon. And Frank was defending Olympic gold medalist.
Right.
But I knew I could race with Frank. Whether or not you could beat him or not, well, he was a tough customer. He was a very determined guy. And but after I ran that marathon, I ran the Olympic trials 10K. And I think I overdid it there wearing spikes, that hard plate in the shoe. And so I hurt my foot, so I stopped doing speed work for about 5 weeks before the Olympic marathon. I lost my sharpest fitness and my foot hurt some, So that cost me a lot. But this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's why the Olympic Games is such an amazing thing if you can score there, particularly if you can score twice like Frank Shorter did. He had that, whatever it was, that the capability to handle anything just about. And but 1980 President Carter chose the Olympic boycott to kind of make his point against the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan at the time.
Right.
I was not really mad at President Carter. I liked President Carter tremendously. I actually met him once.
Yeah.
And he was a runner. He was a runner from his Naval Academy days and everything, So he was, but I think it was more our Olympic Committee. What happened was, the companies that sponsor our Olympic Committee said, well, we're not going. And that's the way it was. And then my personal thought, Chris, was if the American people don't want us to go, we shouldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is,
Yeah. So looking at your career, though, I might just be making up a story here, but I'm going to ask the question anyway to see if I'm right. 76, you have that bad luck at the Olympic Games. And then reading your story, you completely go off after that. Like, you literally just go to a different level. You win 4 straight Boston marathons, or 3 straight, 4 wins total from 78 to 80, 4 straight New York City marathons from 76 to 79. This was all done after the Olympics. So was there like you know what, I kind of got screwed at the Olympics. Now I'm not going to let anybody win for a few years. Is that in your mentality?
What it was, Chris, because of my Olympic destruction in 76, the 1976 New York City Marathon was my Olympic race, and where I defeated Edge.
So the motivation changed, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah, there's the hand of fate for everybody in different ways and aspects. And in the sports world, we see it all the time, and that's why the Olympics are so dramatic.
Yeah.
And you once every 4 years. That's not too often. Come on.
Right. Well, I'm a very competitive person. So if that happened to me, I would have gone to, like, you have 2 choices at that point, right? You could either, you can either get the I feel sorries for myself and just completely shell yourself up, or if you have the competitive spirit, you're going to be like, I'm going to hit a different gear, so to speak, and it's time to really show up or show out, And for me as a competitive guy, man,
Yeah.
that Olympic experience would really, really drive me to do better,
It was very frustrating when I hobbled into the stadium in Montreal, 76. It was getting dark, and I looked up at the stadium. It was just closing up. The Olympics were closing, and there was a big sign that said, "See you in Moscow in 1980." But there was no 1980.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of an Olympic jinx, I think.
And
But I
I
think
just
you're
want to
right.
tell people out there too. You finished the race in Montreal, and you were 40th place, which means
Mhm.
you were the 40th fastest racer in the world with a self-described injury. That is insane, just by itself. But that is failure, isn't it?
Well, it was failure, but if you finish, that counts too.
Damn
So
straight it does. Yeah.
unless you're really, really beat up,
I mean,
most
for
marathon.
everybody else in the world, though, it's like, wow, you did great. But for you personally,
Yeah,
that's like, no, 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 no. I failed. This is what failure looks like.
it was what failure looks like. That's
Yeah,
right.
because man, I've seen people, on the podium at different sports that are, they got a bronze medal or a silver medal, and they are absolutely distraught. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because they didn't win. So like, it's like failure is second place sometimes. You know what I mean?
it can be. It can be, and it's a hard place to get hit. But I think coming back to New York was starting to flex its muscles. It was the first five-borough New York City Marathon, Chris.
Yeah.
Before, it had been 4 laps of Central Park in September, heat and humidity.
Right.
I ran one of those and I keeled over at one point. A friend got me up to finish, but those were the bad, hard days of marathoning. Today, marathoning is a much more carefully run and a sport in which we have so much more knowledge and you can do better in. But yeah, definitely New York. Fred LeBeau came down to the Falmouth Road Race where Frank Shorter, the Olympic gold and silver medalist, and I were racing. Frank beat me there too. But Fred invited us to this new five-borough New York City Marathon. And we said, yeah, we'll duke it out there. And Frank was making jokes about, you think you're really going to be able to pull it off to run a marathon through the streets of New York? It's a joke, You can't do that.
I wanted
But
to talk a little bit too about we talked about failure and sometimes you have to lose to understand why you want to win, right? So I want to talk about a situation in your very first Boston Marathon. We're in 1973 now. You dropped out of this race after 20 miles, and then you ended up, I don't want to say quitting, but you stopped running for 3 months after that. What did that failure at that time teach you about, wanting to be more successful?
I was sort of crushed. I thought, I've got to go train somewhere where it's warm. And I tried to move to California, actually, and but didn't know anyone there. Didn't have any money really, no job prospects or anything. It was just like a lark. But I think I just had to do something. So I tried to do that. Then I finally moved home to Connecticut and Massachusetts, and because you got to go where you are relaxed and comfortable.
Yeah.
You've got to be where you, and Joan Bennett Samuelson has said that too. People said, why didn't you go up to high altitude in Colorado like Frank Shorter? And she said, no, I like to run from home. That's where you feel your best. Um, so that's what I did. And that's when I later joined Greater Boston Track Club. And my life started to change. And I had those teaching jobs. And then we opened the store. And once we opened the store, and I started to go to other marathons. Once you win Boston, Chris, you get invited to other marathons all around the world.
Right.
Now, today there are what they call the 7 world marathon majors, Tokyo, London, Boston, Chicago, New York, and Sydney, Australia. But I think there are actually more than that. I think there's about another 4 or 5 that are world marathon majors. For example, Paris
Yeah.
Marathon, the Fukuoka International Marathon in Japan, maybe Beppu in Japan, and certainly China. either Shanghai or one of their marathons will have to become a major. So I was learning all this stuff about the marathon. It took me a while. It took me 3 years to get a grip on how to run Boston, what the course is like. There's a lot of downhill, Chris, and you think it's easy running downhill, and it is to a point. But then that hit, going down, down, down,
Mm-hmm.
your legs get really tight and sore.
So yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the difference between courses and cities and championships and things like that. So you're obviously your home marathon is the Boston. So I imagine you're probably not only running that every year but also training that course all the time as well, getting ready for the main event. And then you talk about once you win the Boston Marathon, you get to go to these other places. But obviously you're going to be more educated on your home course. So like if
Yeah.
you're going to Tokyo or Sydney or wherever, it's
Mhm.
not like you get to train on that course for 8 months, but you go in cold and you win those kinds of races too. How are you training for the different course from kind of remotely?
Well, most marathons are flat courses. Boston and New York are the two major exceptions, though there are some other kind of extreme ones like the Beijing, um, the wall
Yeah.
in China marathon. So every race is different. For example, I ran Houston Marathon twice, and sometimes I was just winging it, and I like to just wing it and just run with the others. You're always looking who is your competition,
Yeah.
who's and most of the time I knew them, or knew most of them. Sometimes you didn't, and then you could be taken by surprise.
Do you
And
feel like the
because
other runners are your biggest threat, or is it the course itself that's your biggest threat?
it's the other runners.
Yeah.
It's the other runners. You can train quite a lot. We're all training for the same distance, the 26 miles, 385 yards. So it's a
So
matter of
so going in, you're thinking about this guy and this guy. You're not thinking about this hill or if it's going to be 100 degrees or if it's going to be cold. You're more worried about the second guy or the fourth guy or whoever, right?
well, you're always looking at your competition. It's
Yeah.
just like race car driving. I think the race car drivers, they know who their main rivals are. And the same thing is true in the marathon. The thing is, the marathon now has grown so big,
Hmm.
and with the advent of the high altitude born runners from Kenya and Ethiopia,
Right.
really pushing it really hard. Though the Ethiopians have been at it since the early '60s, when Bagila took two golds. So that altitude birth and training gives you a major edge. Now, most countries have some altitude, and we do too. So a lot of our champions come from altitude, but not all of them.
Hmm.
So you look at
Do you feel like those guys have an advantage over somebody like you from Massachusetts? Like if somebody's running in the Rockies in Colorado and you
yeah,
have a high altitude race coming up, they would seem
yep,
to have an advantage. Or if somebody is
yes,
training in Texas and you know that you're about to run in 95 degrees, that Texas runner probably has a bit of an advantage, right?
yeah. In Boston, in the spring, it can be hot or it can be kind of cold or cool,
Right.
but so runners from Texas, Florida, California, um, Ethiopia, Kenya, they come in from training in warm weather, not brutal weather, but weather that got them used to the heat. Because once you get used to the heat and your body's used to perspiring a lot and can cool you down, you're going to do better. My first marathon, we went from coldish to 75 degrees or something in 4 days. So I think Boston's the trickiest marathon to win because of the weather and the course.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why it's probably the most famous marathon in the world too. I mean, let's be honest, you don't hear people talking about the New York Marathon. You hear people talking about the Boston Marathon. And yes, I
Well,
am biased 100%.
you're an honest Boston guy, but Boston is the oldest marathon in the world.
Mhm.
There's an old one in Korea, and Fukuoka is about 65 years old, but Boston's like 129 years old, and those crazy guys who started it from the Boston Athletic Association way back kept it going
Yeah.
for some strange reason. But it is the running the marathon is kind of this unusual quest. It's almost not real. It's kind of silly and stupid in a certain way. You're like, what the heck? What are
Yeah.
you doing? And it's kind of macho in a certain way, but it's also kind of it's friendship.
Yep.
You train with your friends, at the end you compare notes, and we're all kind of a little crazed. And there's a millions of us now. I mean, every year 500,000 Americans run a marathon, and millions have run marathons, and we produce a lot of really good runners to
I'm
this
gonna
day.
keep it real, Bill. I get bored just trying to drive a marathon. Never mind trying to run one.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I
I'm a
hear
big
you.
guy. I can't even imagine doing that, man. Like, holy crap. You talked about, or you alluded to, African runners, and I definitely wanted to get your insight on this because for as long as I've been alive, and I watch every Olympics every single 4 years, it seems like the Kenyans and the Nigerians and the people from that part of the world are very, very, very proficient at long distance running. What is it
Mhm.
about them that makes them so tough to beat from a long distance standpoint?
Well, some things are very simple, and that's one thing is the altitude birth.
Mhm.
Another two is a great training environment, running on dirt roads, so you protect your body. Running on asphalt or concrete is harder on your body.
It's more impact.
Yeah, more impact in that hard surface with no give. But I think it's more a variety of things. Everything ever since Kip Keino, the great Kenyan miler, um, raced America's Jim Ryan in 1968 at the Mexico City Olympic Games at altitude, 7,000 feet.
Right.
He had the edge because of that over Jim. But suddenly there was a kind of a mystique. Then I've raced some of the Kenyans over the years, and they're really tough mentally and physically. Because one thing you got to remember, they're coming from a country with per person incomes $2,000 a year.
Mm. Right.
This isn't America or Japan or China or advanced countries in Europe. I've actually never been there, but I've met a number of the Kenyans over 30, 40 years, like Henry Rono, the great Kenyan distance runner who recently passed away. Never got to take part in the Olympic Games.
Hmm.
Um, but um, but I think it's a number of factors, and today the shoe companies are very aware of how good they are,
Yeah.
and so they will go in and they'll support a whole team of runners. One shoe
They've
company
been
will.
good for generations, though, man. Like they've owned the Olympics for a really, really long time. So,
That's
what do other countries, Americans especially, what do we have to do to kind of lessen the divide between our talent and theirs?
Well, it's all in the training. And we did actually have a program for a while out in Mammoth, California, funded by U.S. Athletics and everything, our Olympic track and field organization. And they funded a program so up and coming young runners like Mebka Flazigi and Ryan Hall and others were able to go there and train at this high altitude site. They also Americans have access to these Olympic training centers. One's in Colorado Springs, and there's different places you can go. Our top runners now, Connor Mance, Clayton Young, on the men's side, are both from altitude in Utah. They're up at about 5, 6, 7,000 feet. And their coach is Ed Eyestone, who's a terrific Olympian himself, who I used to race and everything, and super nice guy. But the knowledge of the coaches is key, and the Kenyans have good coaches. It's not all good. The Kenyan success story, there are negatives
Yeah, of
because
course. Yeah.
like in our sport is bedeviled a bit by the doping issue.
Yep.
And I think that has hit Kenya really hard, and so sometimes you see certain times and you say, well, is this real? And so our sport is having a tough time dealing with these issues now,
Do you
and it's
wonder
not.
about that as a runner when you're running in a race? Do you wonder if somebody who's passed you up is doping? Is that in your mind?
You know, now I'm way too old to worry.
Right, of course, but back then is what I mean.
Well, what it was, yeah, Chris, for sure. Back then, very little. I did race against some runner, the runners from Russia, the Soviet Union, East Germany, where there was purported use of drugs. And we know that was true in some cases. I met a Russian guy, really, he became a good friend. We brought him over to the U.S. to run Boston and stayed at my brother's house and all. I said, Leonid, did you ever try any drugs? And he said, once, you know, but most of them, they're just training hard.
Yeah.
The training's hard. They're going up to altitude in their country or wherever they can go. The Europeans all have these Olympic training centers and everything. But I think so the Kenyans are born, and the Ethiopians are born in the Rift Valley. It's an area of uh, Eastern Africa, I guess it is, up north. It's all at altitude.
Right.
So all of the runners there have that kind of an edge,
So the altitude is really what's helping them the most, you think?
I think it's that, and that because of that, they believe in themselves.
Well, that, and if you're racing at altitude, you're training at altitude, and then you have a flat course. I mean, that's just going to be child's play at that point. Like, it's just flat. I can handle this like nothing. I'll take a nap halfway through, right?
Oh, that's true, and that's what's been happening because the shoe companies are pushing shoe sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they want fast times, and now we have all these new marathons that are on super fast flat courses. But courses have to be a, developed at certain parameters.
Right.
They actually say that Boston has too much downhill,
Yeah.
and that makes it too easy. So it can't, because there could be wind at your back, and it is true. About once every 10 years, you get a tailwind. But the downhill, actually, when you are a marathoner and you run Boston, you will find out that it's hard on your body. In fact, the former world record holder from Kenya, the man considered to be perhaps the best of all time, Eliud Kipchoge, did not have a very good race at Boston when he ran it for the first and only time 2 years ago. And I think it's because circumstances were so different. In many races, they allowed the lead runners to be paced and to run in a little pocket, a little protected group, So you're not racing against those other guys. They're your friends. They're
Right.
your teammates.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on because everyone's pushing for fast times.
Yeah. And that's going to help with your fast time, right? If you're in a group of people, because if you're out there by yourself, you're lonely. You're not going to push yourself quite as much because you're not being
Mentally,
challenged, right?
mentally,
Yeah.
mentally, you're in cruise control, running
Yeah,
with
if you've
someone.
got a group of 8 guys with you, you have to push to stay with that group. So that's just going to push you harder anyway. But like if
I
you're,
mean,
go
when
ahead.
Iliad ran Boston, he had some young Kenyans whose goal it was to beat him, and they did.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
they did.
Absolutely. I love that. I want to talk about the first time you won the marathon because I've heard stories. Again, I research all the time when I'm doing these interviews, and I, the first time you won the Boston Marathon, is this true? You stopped to tie your shoes twice.
Yeah, I stopped to tie my shoes. You got to tie your shoes. The
What?
laces undone because I was sufficiently ahead. I was racing a fella who had beaten me before, Jerome Drayton from Canada, who was Canada's top marathoner for 40 years. But at that time, I had just run in the World Cross Country Championships and I won a bronze medal.
Yeah,
And so that's like an Olympic medal in cross country.
of
And
course.
only four American men, senior men, have won a medal in World Cross. So I knew I was in good shape. So I heard someone yell, "Go Canada!" Because Jerome always he was very proud of being Canadian. He wore the maple leaf.
Yeah.
And I said, "Damn it, no." And the course record was held by a British fellow who was my friend, Ron Hill, but I still wanted, I didn't like that. I said, "No, the hell with that."
Tie your shoes though. You have to be terrified, right?
You know what? I knew I had a lead. There was a vehicle going by me, the press bus, and Jacques Semple, the old race director, feisty old timer marathoner. He said, "Bill, you're breaking the record." And he said, but I had to stop and tie my shoes, but it takes 5 seconds. You
Yeah.
tie your shoes and then you go. But I think that mental break is good.
Okay.
And what you
Well, you
see,
talk
like,
about 5 seconds, but like earlier, you said you lost the Olympic trials by 7 seconds. So like 5 seconds is a long time.
oh yeah, yeah, you can lose a marathon. Boston's been won or lost by 1 or 2 seconds several times.
Yeah, yeah,
It's hard to believe, but the competition is so intense.
yeah,
But I knew I was in the lead, and so when you're in this position mentally, Chris, you're like, I am going for it, and nothing's going to stop me.
yeah.
I am gonna-
Have there been times when you needed to tie your shoes and you didn't because you didn't feel like you had the time?
No, no. Once I was running the Cherry Blossom 10 miler, the credit union Cherry Blossom 10 miler, Washington, D.C., our top 10 mile in the country. And I was trying for the American age 50 course record, but it was raining and my shoes came untied and they were knotted and I couldn't get them undone. And that was it.
Yeah,
I
it's
couldn't get
over.
it. It was like I lost 30 seconds and that was it.
Yeah.
Never got that record.
Are you still running today?
I am still running today. I'm pretty damn slow, but I think what happens as you get older, and my rival, Frank Shorter, we're friends now. We used to be arch rivals, He's slower. We're all slower. The only one who's not slower is Joan Benoit Samuelson.
Wow.
but but we're all having fun. We're still having fun. I ran a race out in Arizona 2 weeks ago with my partner Karen, and it was a race I'd done many times. It's called the Runner's Den Pancake Run because when you finish, you get pancakes as many as you want.
I bet you
And
I could
that's like,
finish that one.
yeah, this is this really cool side to our sport. Yeah, like every race has a personality, Chris.
Of course, yeah, of course. So as you age, over time, obviously your body's going to change. There's going to be more aches and pains and soreness where you didn't know you had places to be sore. How do you overcome those challenges?
Partly it's a mental thing, but I've always had training partners. I ran with my brother and Jason as a youth in Newington High School. College, I ran with Jeff Galloway from Atlanta, Georgia, Amby Burfoot. I had good teammates, good coach in Elmer Swanson. So I always had support.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is support. All you need is one friend to get out the door with to go on your daily or every other day walk or run or bike ride.
Yeah.
But most people never had that, Chris, is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that is changing. I think that is changing because people are getting into these Olympic sports. I call them the Olympic cardio sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like I see more people on bikes today than ever before. So that's a great thing.
And there's platforms for people of your age as well, right? Like you said, you had like an over 50 race. So there are like races for over 70 and over 75 and things like that.
Yes, yes. My former Wesleyan College teammate, Amby Burfoot, he works with the group, the Frank Bright group. It's a national group of guys over the age of 75. Not and women are coming up too. We've got to remember that they are
Yeah.
now equal in numbers to men in cross country, road racing, marathons. So that changed everything. That really made a huge change. And Joan Benoit Sampson played a big role in that when she took the gold in LA in '84.
I love that. Awesome stuff, man. We have Bill Rodgers here on the Boston Chris podcast for the first time ever, picking his brain about the passion needed for running and cross country and just a phenomenal career. We're going to get into some fun segments now with Bill. I have like 5 or 6 fun segments, which these are kind of self-reflective kind of questions and put you on the spot kind of stuff. Let's see how you handle this.
Okay.
The first segment is called Mount Rushmore, and so Mount Rushmore has 4 presidents on it. In your opinion, who should be on the Mount Rushmore of long distance running?
Oh my God. It's very tricky. Well, I think we should go with 2 men and 2 women. And for the 2 men, um, I think I'm going to put up. I think I'm going to put up Bibi Bakila, the Ethiopian who took the 2 Olympic golds. Probably because he was more my era and everything. And then maybe from Ethiopia, and maybe the American Frank Shorter, Olympic gold and silver medalist, the other man,
Okay.
distance running. And then on the women's side, I'll go with someone in my age group there, Greta White, the 9-time New York City Marathon champion, and then also Joan Benoit Samuelson, who took Boston and Chicago and won gold in LA and has been high level runner all her life.
Love it. Okay,
It
there's your Mount
was-
Rushmore from the one and only Bill Rodgers. Good stuff, man. Okay, so my next segment is called What the Heck? And this is just a game of rapid fire questions where you have to turn off your filter. So I ask the question, and whatever enters your brain has to leave your mouth. Don't stop it. All right? Number one,
Okay.
pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
What was it again? Oh,
Pineapple.
pineapple on pizza?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, all right, so that's a yes. Okay, number two, are you more of a hunter or a gatherer?
Hunter.
Okay. Number 3, what do you think was the best thing before sliced bread?
That's impossible to answer.
All right. Number 4, let me see here. I got to put some funny ones in here too.
Tough one.
All right, number 4. If all right, this is an Olympic style question. If one Olympic synchronized swimmer drowns, what happens to the others?
They get to the surface as quick as they can.
So you don't think they drown too?
No.
Well, it's not very
No.
it's not very synchronized. Then they probably wouldn't get a good score from the French judge.
They would help the other swimmer, though.
Okay, well, not very professional of them, I'm going to say, right? So I'm just going to throw
Yeah.
that out there. Okay, so yeah, it's all about the gold here. Life or death doesn't matter, right? That's not very synchronized. It seems like they got out of step a little bit. All right, number 5. If you could go back in history to witness anything in time, what would it be?
The dinosaurs.
Okay, all right, last one. Let me see here. I don't want to go too crazy with you. All right, number 5. Have you ever? What is the most embarrassing thing that happened to you during a race?
Most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me during a race? Um, I think one time I was running this race. I was in the lead, and I was sick with dysentery, so I had to look for the woods. And I ran into the woods. When I came out, a dog came barking and yelling at me. I picked up a rock and threw it. It bounced off the dog and hit a window across the way. So I took off like hell. It gave me a little adrenaline. But these kinds of things can happen because road racing is wide open.
So
It's the
even
street.
during the races, you're throwing stuff through windows. Bill, we said
Yeah.
we stopped playing baseball so that wouldn't happen, and you're still throwing stuff through windows.
Road racing is a really it's kind of a feisty sport, but it's a great sport, and it's shake hand sport too. But for a
Yeah.
while, you are duking it out.
I'm just
you're duking
thinking
it.
about that whole situation. You're trying to, take care of business, and a dog comes after you.
Oh, there's no
Good
mercy.
Lord.
There is no mercy.
They probably thought you were doping during that race. How did he get so fast?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man, that's great
It
stuff.
gave me some adrenaline.
I love it. All right, so that was what the heck with Bill Rodgers. All right, next one. Usually this is called one artist, but I'm going to make it a little bit different because obviously you're not a musician. If there was one person in the world of racing that you feel didn't get their due from a public standpoint or a fame standpoint, who would that be?
Didn't get their due. One person in the marathoning world.
Yeah.
Um. It's a very tricky one. I'm not sure exactly. Don Cardone is one fellow. He's a fellow American Olympian. Took fourth place in the Olympic marathon in 1976 when Frank Shorter took a silver behind East Germany's Waldemar Cierpinski. Cierpinski may have used a certain level of doping or something,
Yeah.
or steroids. It was an unclear kind of situation, but if that were true,
And it
you know,
cost
and
him a
proved-
medal, didn't it?
cost him a medal.
Yeah.
And Don is one of these, super nice, never got angry. I never saw him speak real angry in my life type guys, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's kind of this can happen kind of this way.
All right, next segment is called Personal Best. I love this one, especially from very accomplished folks like you. So, Personal Best is essentially like if I was looking at your career and over the course of all of your accomplishments as an outsider, I would say that you being inducted into the National Track and Field Hall of Fame in 1999 perhaps would be your greatest accomplishment. However, from a personal standpoint, what do you feel like was your best accomplishment? And it doesn't have to be racing.
Yeah, my best accomplishment. I don't know. There's life, and then there's sport and everything, and from the sport thing, it's making the Olympic team. But overall, it's being a dad, and that's the best thing in the world. And I have two daughters, Elise and Erica, and they mean more to me than any Olympics or anything. But but so I think I would stick with that.
That's
The most important. Yeah,
that's a great
that's
answer. Okay,
just really
last
great.
last one. This is called "Who Do You Think You Are?" So, who is Bill Rodgers?
Who am I? I'm a road runner. There's a great song, and I know you're a music guy, and I love music. My dad was a piano player. I thought you were going to ask me who are my favorite musicians, but all runners love music. That's why there was the rock and roll marathon series and everything. But I now I lost my train of thought.
Who is Bill Rodgers?
Oh yeah, who's Bill Rodgers? He's a road runner, and there's a song, "I'm a Road Runner, Baby." And I knew this guy who's like 80 years old, and he used to sing that song all the time. "I'm a road runner, baby. Yeah, that's who I am." And it go on and on and on. It's just fantastic. And that's running and music are like this.
Yeah,
So that you have a show on music and running, it's not far apart.
yeah, I love that.
So
So, 2025. What's in the future for Bill Rodgers?
2025, this year's my 50th anniversary since I won Boston in 75.
That's true.
And so
Yeah,
yeah, so I'll be doing some things in Boston with the BAA with a lot of my friends, and my partner Karen and my daughter Elise, and maybe Erica, my youngest one. Uh, but I think mainly it's just the marathon is like a celebration of life. It just as music is, and that's what it is. And road racing is. We're all there, though there is a lot of gritting and gnashing of teeth too. It's almost like kind of intensely, nearly religious type thing. Some people take the marathon real serious, and they will run till they drop. I wasn't one of those people. I would just go over to the side of the road and lie down
yeah, yeah.
and say, "I quit."
Well, Bill, I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate an hour of your time today, and just what an interesting, intriguing human being, and what a life you have led, man.
Thank you very much, Boston Chris.
Of
Thank
course.
you very much. You got a great show.
Thank you, man.
Hey everybody, it's me, Jarrett from your favorite band, Bowling for Soup. Thank you for tuning in to the Boston Chris podcast.